You're listening to Francis Oblivion and the Mad Undead by J. Johnson Higgins. This audiobook edition is a Kiss the Widow production.
Chapter 20. The Many Faces of the Old Facility.
Journal of Dr. Rebecca T.D. Stars Aza, October 20th. I took a deep breath as if revived from drowning. I may as well have been. I spit so much blood from my mouth it was unbelievable, like I must have been swimming in that shit. Then I vomited and coughed uncontrollably. It was the most horrible feeling, but it was necessary. I felt pain throughout my body, but particularly at my side where the wound was, and in my lungs as I attempted to breathe, while I was finally getting a grip on my surroundings. That's right, I'd been shot. I'd lost consciousness, but just returned. I examined my wound and realized there was not one there anymore, just a mark. It was all coming back to me, and it was finally starting to make sense. I had died. At least temporarily I did. Let me explain that. I was sent to some dark place for a short while after I'd been shot. It looked like this world, and I could see a light that I had an urge to pass through, but then I thought, like in a lucid dream, that this was not the time, and I had free will to do as I pleased. How did I know for sure that it wasn't my time? I saw my brother, Dylan, there. He told me that I was not ready to go, and that I had work to do, and then he was gone. I looked over my shoulder and saw another door, rapidly trying to close, but it was so far away that I was sure that I'd never reach it in time. If it closed, I'd have no choice but the other bright one in front of me. Not today. I sprinted toward the alternate door, but I was not going fast enough, so then I started to fly and shot like a bolt of lightning. Yes, I was making it. As I'd done on more than one occasion, I'd caught the door before it closed and leapt through it. It felt like a free fall after jumping through that door, and my life was returning. For that to be possible, I had to fight for it and draw the energy from the ground below me, the earth, my power element. It was working. I used this energy to spontaneously heal my wound and seal it shut. It would give me back my strength and then some. That was when the breath of life returned to my lungs and the out-of-place liquids in my body needed to leave immediately. I drew a deep breath. After I steadied myself and got my vision back, I stood, using the truck next to me as support, and looked around. I quickly looked toward the road and saw Adrian running. He seemed so far away by then. "Hey!" I shouted at him, and he froze. "Where the fuck are you going?" Adrian turned around. He was in a state of complete disbelief.
Becca!
He shouted and started to return. He approached, but I held out my hand before he reached me. "Easy. This still hurts like I don't know what."
I was getting the rest of the supplies. How did you? I thought you were.
I showed him again the wing tattoos on my ankles. The wings tattoo. I'm fast and hard to kill. Remember? I explained to him, and he seemed to remember and understand.
And the wound?
I showed it to him. It was closed. It's closed. I'll be okay. I usually am. Just give it an hour. I'm tough and can take it. That's why when I say to keep your fucking head down, I actually mean it. I can survive a hit like this. This isn't new to me. I grabbed hold of his arm and said, like I said, we're all in one piece, and I made it fun. I saw Adrian grin, but he shook his head in disbelief. I'd just blown his mind. We walked back to the motorcycle. I looked at the facility that was nearby, back to the ramps on the other side of it, and then back down the path we'd traveled on.
What's on your mind?
Adrian asked. They'll follow us. I bought us some extra time, but it won't last forever. If we could just get to that facility over there, we'd have a little more control over our environment. The problem is that we don't have as much time as I was originally hoping to get it ready.
We could double back and throw them off.
Adrian started.
That is, if he's following our tracks. We could retrace our steps back to where the gravel starts and from there take a few alternative paths, so it's not obvious where we went. We could set up special diversions in different areas local to here. We could hide the bike in the process and continue on foot the rest of the way to the facility, like you said. It might buy us even more time.
He hesitated for a second, but spoke again.
I could do this if you'd like.
How do you propose to do it?
I have these.
Adrian grabbed the bag and began opening it.
I thought they might come in handy.
Adrian removed a smaller sack from the larger bag and showed me some dynamite he'd picked up from the garage, or at least an explosive resembling it. I smiled involuntarily while shaking my head. I must be honest. I was of two minds when I saw the explosives, fear and excitement. I was scared to death of the whole scenario of being anywhere near Francis since the gun surfaced. I thought of how quickly my great-grandfather lost Arnold Locke despite following a plan because of a single shot, and how something like that could happen right now. There was no question that the shadows were aiming for Adrian specifically, they just happened to get me instead. If something happens to him, I'd lose my mind. I was about to tell him that there was no way I'd allow him to go through with his plan all alone, but there was merit to the idea. If he threw the mad undead off my path, it would be just a little more time, and that might be all I need to get back an advantage. I also felt that I was marginalizing my good friend by being so stubborn. It was in Adrian's nature to at least try this. We may not be in a war zone in the classic sense of the word, but I thought of how in such a situation, Adrian would be that guy who could stealthily arrange diversions, quickly and calmly regardless of the tension building, and be back without a scratch. He was fast, paid attention to details, and could be a ghost when he wanted to be. He was the man who could abandon the motorcycle and likely gain an advantage from doing so. If I asked him to meet me at the facility in 30 minutes, he'd be there in 25, whether that meant the mission was completed, modified, or had to be aborted because of unforeseen circumstances. He'd still meet me at the facility, and I knew he would. The plan would indeed divide the mad undead search if they were in fact closing in on us as fast as I estimated. It would confuse them. It would allow us to more efficiently hide, set our traps, and move without calling attention to ourselves. I really wish I knew that you were carrying those around. I'd have shot for less of a rough ride. It's a good idea, though, I said to him. I think we should do that, but I'm really scared. You saw what happened back there. They were shooting at us, shooting at you. This is serious. I saw Adrian glance down at the bottom of my bike, a double take. He must have just seen the dozen or so bullet holes in the chassis for the first time. He continued to explain.
Yes, and that's why I think the explosives would help scatter them, but I'm just not sure how to detonate them if we're not around them. Do you have any suggestions?
I thought about this for a second. In any regular situation, and granted, there is no regular situation where I'm fooling with explosives, I'd use whatever charge or trigger accompanies them. Because bringing them was merely a spontaneous afterthought, we did not have those triggers, but the explosives themselves were still inherently dangerous if motivated by some other external catalyst. That was when an idea hit me. Let me see the bag, I said. I kneeled to the ground, and I went through the contents of the backpack. I brushed through my collection to find a smaller pouch. Inside the pouch was my collection of incenses and oils. There was one in particular I needed to find, and it jumped right out at me. It was an orange-red color distinct from most of the others, which were yellow, clear, green, and even blue. I picked the small vial up and held it before me. I opened it and sniffed it. I could smell ginger most of all, as well as rosemary, clove, and petitgrain.
What is that?
This is fire oil.
Like for a lamp?
No, not for a lamp. It's for me.
What does it do?
It helps conjure the properties of fire, under the right conditions.
And what conditions are those?
Many, but I can arrange for them.
How does it work?
I did my best to explain to him that if I applied the oil to myself, that I could detonate the explosives with my mind, so long as I can be grounded and calm when the time came. I knew that would be a challenge given that the circumstances were anything but relaxing these days and the moon was working against me, but it was really our best shot. For a moment, Adrian looked like he didn't quite believe this oil was capable of what I was saying. That soon changed. I needed only to remind him of the last 24 hours and our broader situation, that the rest of civilization was inside of a small bottle that was the same size because of my mind, words, calmness, grounding, and yes, funny-colored magical oils in little vials. He needed to think back only a few moments and remember that I'd revived myself from death using a tattoo and the power of the earth. That was when things started to make sense for him. Beyond the metaphysical explanation, Adrian had activated my mind to plan for this situation in a broader sense. I removed the map of the area, looked around, and marked our location. From there, I marked a series of alternative paths that resembled veins on the map. I placed X marks at 6 locations and left the 7th, our intended final destination of the facility, unmarked. Out of instinct, I was about to create an efficient circuit to them to minimize retracing and increase efficiency, but realized, as Adrian suggested earlier, that the actual paths between the heaps and mounds should be a retracing of steps and should be a little inefficient if this plan was going to work. This would give the appearance to our demon pursuers of several forks in the road by which to pursue us. The decision about how much retracing would occur is a decision best left for the moment of action, considering time and exposure, best left up to Adrian. The last location was to be reached on foot, as Adrian suggested, no motorcycle. After all these tasks are completed, we'd later cause explosions throughout this web of paths and further confuse them. In the last step, I want you to find the path to the ramp over there. Take the bike far past it and abandon it there. This will give them the belief that we possibly bypassed the area altogether or exhausted our interest in the area and moved on.
And what will you do?
I'll go to the facility first. I need to get it ready for us, protections and so forth. I was about to hand the keys to Adrian, but when he reached out, I held them back and said more. No wheelies, no speeding, don't cross water, do not try any quick turnarounds, and do not drive it in the rain. Leave it behind and run if you have to, because if you hurt yourself on this thing because you didn't listen, so help me, I'm hurting you too. Got it? That's 2 for 1. Try me. I tossed him the keys. I felt better about the whole situation already.
Journal of Adrian Eckenrode. October 20th. I raced to the first location that Becca marked for me. Okay, maybe I didn't race. I moved at a decent clip to the first location for someone relatively new to motorcycles and just beyond my comfortable speed. I slowed Becca's motorcycle to a stop and dismounted into what looked to be a construction site unrelated to the waste disposal nearby. I looked around for the most conspicuous thing that I could find to add a stick of dynamite. I found it. There was a white and blue mobile tower crane standing high above me, attached to a semi-trailer with its outriggers fully extended. A telescoping section projected from this base. I approached the crane's cabin and opened the small sack. The door opened easily, and I placed the explosive inside. Afterward, I closed the door. The next location was simply a pile of broken concrete. I placed the dynamite underneath the mound. The third was placed inside of the exhaust pipe of a utility vehicle I could not get into in a timely fashion. When doubling back over my tracks, I left a fourth surprise at Junks Road, right where the piles of debris became the most troublesome. I was running short on time, so the fifth one, and unfortunately was now the last to serve as a diversion, would have to count. I'd found my way to the overpass that Becca had mentioned and took the fifth explosive back along the highway heading toward the eastern side of the island. There, I needed to find the largest diversion I could, since it was further away compared to the others. As luck would have it, I'd found a service station there. I put the explosive inside of a waste bin and moved the container closer to the pumps. In fact, I went ahead and threw the sixth explosive that would have gone to waste in a second one, just in case. I took the opportunity to take a quick look around the convenience store portion of the station. I grabbed some water, sunflower seeds, a pack of Becca's favorite cigarettes, as well as lighters, replacement medical and hygiene supplies, and a few other random items as I came across them, also just in case. They were all things I could easily throw into the small sack and carry. I didn't know if we'd need these things, but I wasn't sure when the opportunity would come again. Before I left, I grabbed one more thing. A ridiculous birthday card that I did not have adequate time to shop for. On my way back to the ramp, which I now learned was Junction 4, it started to rain. At first it was very light, but it quickly became a tempestuous downpour. I soon brought the machine to a stop and had to abandon it. Yes, I did plan to abandon the motorcycle anyway as part of the plan, but I thought it was funny that the primary reason I stopped was because Becca said she would kill me if I didn't. Becca's voice echoed in my mind telling me to get off it for safety reasons. I likely would have driven longer otherwise. Her words have a way of sticking in my mind. The good news was that I could see the facility again from where I was. I just had to make it back through the pouring rain. I'd manage.
Journal of Dr. Rebecca T.D. Stars Aza, October 20th. I headed straight for the facility, but I did not enter it as soon as I'd arrived. There were preparations to make. This would be a process from beginning to end with a series of important steps if this was to be successful. The location where we planned to make our last stand against Francis was a peculiar place, and I don't want to downplay its significance. Let me say something about this facility because it was just as much a character in this account as any of the mad and dead, Francis or Adrian. The building was a waste-to-energy facility that, from what I hear, reduced the volume of waste in the Siena region significantly while extracting energy in the process. While its emissions were said to be among the lowest of any plant of this kind in the world, it was, conversely, the leading emitter of greenhouse gases in the region. For these reasons, the building was regularly both praised and hated by the community. The facility had a large stacked tower looking over the land with the name Siena written on one side and ERS, Energy Retrieval Systems, written on the opposite side of it. It could be seen for miles. There were 4 processing units at the rear connected to a furnace, boiler, and air pollution control system. It was apparently the boiler which harvested the thermal energy in the form of steam from combusted municipal waste. There was amazingly little odor from the facility overall even when I'd passed it a while ago with the power on and before my spell to place humankind in a sanctuary. Interestingly, during its regular operation it typically disposes of tons of municipal solid waste every day and recovered ferrous metals for recycling. The burning of waste, however, is not an attractive quality and remains a major concern for all of its health effects, regardless of the efficiency in doing so. This was the source of most of its criticism. Another interesting fact about the facility was that it was also the corporate headquarters of ERS. Therefore, a significant portion of the building on one side contained offices for upper management, conference rooms for the board of directors, and other meeting spaces for clients, affiliates, and visitors. There were even other building tenants, most related to waste management or the energy industry. The result of this combination was a spectacle that was intriguing in many ways. The building was actually a relic and one of a few still standing from a time before. The new frontier in energy could be seen from its window: wind, solar, water, and the earth itself. These are the elements that have been before us all along. SERS must have known this, as they have reinvested in all 4 of those directions and more to become more profitable, and one day the facility will be adaptively reused in its entirety, a process that, as I look at it, has already begun. The building's function was fine and good, but just imagine such a place when no one else was around. The power was not on, where there is no light, but that provided by very few windows. Now imagine that there is a major thunderstorm on its way, restraining what little light there is, and that you would be able to hear the wind and rain hitting against unfamiliar surfaces in most directions. The facility moaned and wept from the rusted doors, rocking back and forth from the gathering winds. Imagine in the industrial areas the countless other noises you would hear in an open place like this, and never have an explanation for because it's so dark. I needed to transform this place. Not physically, but mentally and psychically. I needed it to be a safety zone for us. It needed to be a castle rather than a prison. That was my first goal, and I had a limited time window. My objective was to establish some basic protection for me and Adrian, since this was to be our battleground. We needed a place where we had an advantage and where we could feel we have control if we were to succeed. If I'd neglected this step, we'd have literally walked right into a giant garbage disposal, and all Francis would have to do is push a button and turn it on to achieve his goal. Francis would not be so lucky. I was determined to make this place as much a hell for him as the world had been for me and the people I'd known when he arrived. For him, it should be uncomfortable, constantly working against him, deceptive and deadly. It should make him unwelcome, ill, and alienated. It would be his nightmare. Nothing less was acceptable. The first step was to place a circle of protection around the facility so that Francis and his army would face difficulty even entering any of the doors and windows. I accomplished this by first grounding and centering myself. As I'd mentioned before, this was challenging given our situation, but I managed to do so, thanks to a wonderfully unexpected sight at the front of the facility. Oddly, there was a flower bed there that was still in bloom. I believe they were gladiolus flowers. Seeing these flowers helped me reach a tranquil state. I even picked one and carried the bloom with me as a reminder. I walked with it clockwise around the perimeter of the building with my pace and purposeful steps resembling a tightrope walker. I closed my eyes at times and let the tips of my fingers touch the outer chain fence as a guideline. After 3 cycles, the circle was complete. Once the circle was established, I examined the grounds a little more just to get a sense of it. The facility was surrounded by a concrete lot generally, and 3 major roads fed into it. On those surfaces there was no difficulty. Beyond the fence in most directions there was more of the sandy, dirty landscape, but in 2 directions the lawn was well kept, or at least had been. Those being the main entrance, which faced back toward the mainland western shore, and the one overlooking the ocean, heading toward the other side of the island where Adrian was traveling briefly to create a diversion. I was then on to my second task, strengthening specific barriers. This was something I was familiar with and had done before, but this time it was on a larger scale. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 cans of spray paint. One was white and the other was purple. I shook the cans and proceeded to spray protection symbols on strategic points on the exterior of the facility. No option was off the table if it made sense. On doorways and any windows I could reach, I sprayed symbols of algaes, pentacles, crosses, and the like, all in white to begin, but I had to switch over to purple soon after because the can was running low. I also painted giant symbols on the concrete lots, including the electrical switchyard and garage doors. Air ducts were also a favorite. As soon as I'd made it to the rear lot, I felt my first drops of rain and was thankful to have started the process when I did. I was finished. By the time I'd made it to the entrance, the rain had developed into a major storm. I heard thunder and everything. As I took shelter and shut the door behind me, I hoped Adrian was okay out there on my motorcycle. My deepest concern upon completion of the circle and the inclusion of protection symbols was that it was not powerful enough for my purpose. The circle was so large and the location was so unfamiliar to me with many unknown vibrations that it was hard to know if my workings could overcome the inherent powers of a large and otherwise scary facility. But the preparations were still not over yet. I needed to transform myself a little too, physically and mentally. I'd achieved this by doing something I hadn't done in a while, and since casting my big spell, I applied makeup to my face. I used what neglected materials remained at the bottom of my bag, which was not a large selection, certainly not my first choices, but I made it work. I'm pretty good with makeup, and I've used it for so many different occasions at varying levels of intensity, heavy to light, but I feel the most comfortable with almost none on at all, honestly. In the past, I'd worn it to please myself, to please others, to fool myself, to fool others, for fun, for costuming, because I had to, because I wanted to blend in, and to stand out. Today was different, but I drew on my experiences. Today, it was to be war paint, not literally an excess of stray markings, but simply the wearing of makeup at all under the circumstances. That, to me, was war paint. In particular, I wore heavy eye makeup in an aggressive style and added an accent to my eyebrows. It was a look I've produced before and have always enjoyed it. I wouldn't go so far as to call it corpse paint, but the look of it was getting there. It was to send a message. It was to help me be confident in the face of the cloud-covered world, to draw my best qualities forward while simultaneously calling forward the fighter in me. It was in advance of a meditation sequence and was thus magical, too. I'd put on black lipstick and added a crescent moon to my forehead. I'd be leading Adrian and would appear in full dress to him as well. This was not a rehearsal, but the feature. If he is interested in it, he is welcome to use some of it too. It was to signal that all my actions are deliberate today rather than circumstantial. It was to say I'm not passing through or backing out. I'm here to do something, so let's do it. It reminded me of getting ready for a stunt performance. It was to exceed expectations. If I were to go down this day, I'd be in this state of mind where at least I appeared ready to win.
Journal of Adrian Eckenrode, October 20th. I made it to the front entrance to the facility. Becca had earlier informed me that it was a waste-to-energy plant that was integrated with the many other power generators in the area. The SERS facility had a split personality, in my opinion. What I mean is that it had a peculiar way of presenting two faces. One face was that of a workhorse capable of tremendous productivity when fully functioning and not afraid to get dirty doing it. The second face was the public, clean and diplomatic one that worked very hard not to offend a casual or even close observer. On one side, there were massive garbage incinerators that would normally receive regular deliveries. On the other, this main entrance I found myself at, one could not tell the difference between it and an office building in a suburban corporate park with a basic lot. The architecture was appealing with modern designs, louvers, some daylighting in the lobby anyway, and so forth. There were flagpoles near the front displaying every governmental subdivision still flapping strong against the fierce and building winds. There was shrubbery, flowers, modern windows, and an attractive brick facade too. Very different from the industrial side of the building, which was impressive in its own ways. The road to this main entrance leads back to the broken bridge we would have crossed to get to this island and would have encountered less trouble on. We could not have taken that route because Francis had destroyed it. That is, Junction 1 led directly to the western shore without the strange detours we endured. It was no doubt the official public entrance running the shorter width of the island, which was quite different from the remainder of the work site, which was mostly fenced off except for the truck entrances. It was clear to me that Becca had been here because she had spray painted outside of it on several of its surfaces. This gave me some peace of mind, but I did not know where she would be once I'd gotten here. She hadn't told me where to meet her at the facility, but I had arrived as planned and a little early. I didn't know whether I'd find her wearing a gas mask and spraying symbols on inner parts of the building or if she'd be just waiting inside. It was raining now, after all. She probably was inside now. When I entered the SERS facility, I was soaking wet from the storm. The front door was unlocked to my surprise. Maybe Becca had left it unlocked just for me. Maybe this was a 24-hour operation when it was active or simply open when Becca cast the spell. I did not know. Fall, in terms of its temperature, had been shy for the past few weeks, but I did notice that the temperature today was much colder. Inside, I immediately felt cold and shivered from it, but I was happy to get out of the wind. I needed to lose a soaking layer if I wanted to warm up. There was a security desk just beyond the front door, elevators along the left wall, a lobby and several dried up and dead plants that were originally there to add a warm touch to the space. I firmly shut the glass door behind me and locked it as well before setting my soaked overcoat on the front desk and taking from a rack an abandoned security guard's jacket to replace it. I know what you're thinking, and that answer was no. I did not find anything interesting or helpful in or around the guard's jacket. No weapons, no keys. I had a choice to go left or right, but the options were more limited than they appeared at first glance. The left side that I'd first selected had a metal door that was locked, while on the right was a simple hallway. I want to take this moment to say that this area I was in spoiled me for what was to come. I at least had relative light there. The open space was relatively consistent. It looked like something I was accustomed to. Down the hall, those amenities began to fade away one by one, starting with the light. I came to two more doors that were each locked and a third that opened. It appeared to be a small break room, but that was the least of my concerns. I thought I heard a noise like a door close further down the hall. I wasn't certain. This troubled me because this was the one direction where I could not see all the way to the end. I immediately worked to resolve this by lighting a flare and pushing ahead. Becca had given me this flare specifically for this building, saying that I should never ever go into an unfamiliar building without one. Good advice, because this flare revealed much. As I moved forward, I could see additional doors, each of them locked as I checked them. I'd so far found nothing unusual in this hall, but came to a door to a stairway. I opened it, noted that there was a lower level, but opted to check the floors going up. I'd had to go up several flights before I even came to another door as an option, which implied that a significant amount of space was reserved for other purposes just on the other side of the wall that were not accessible from this point and before offices began again. The elevators probably skipped all of this and went straight to the 14th floor, where I'd finally found a door. The door back into the rest of the building was unlocked. I entered and found another set of non-functioning elevators in a hallway to my left. There were 4 of them. Straight ahead was a set of glass double doors and a symbol on the wall of ERS. I passed through the glass doors and found another front desk. Not for security but for reception. I hardly needed the flare in this area. There were continuous glass windows running completely along a long hallway there that illuminated the front desk. I looked out these windows and received a full view of the water back toward the mainland. I could even see the lighthouse glowing from a distance in the foggy, rainy darkness. It was absolutely an eerie sight though, with the backdrop of intense rain and thunderstorms. Down this hall I saw a few small and empty conference rooms, what looked to be a study or small library too, but there was a main door at the end of the hall. I approached it. The plaque on the far door to the main room read, She Strathmore, Multi-Purpose Room, dedicated 15 years earlier. I entered the room and looked around. The name multi-purpose room was baffling because it simply looked like a nice board of directors' meeting room complete with large windows to overlook the waterfront and the offshore wind farm through the next set of windows. The carpet was blue. There was a large table in the center with chairs surrounding it and a picture on the wall of Fred She Strathmore, who was, according to the nameplate, the first chairman of ERS. There were other less prominent paintings and pictures lining the walls too. Only after a moment did I realize that the table in the center was several tables. Nice ones, pushed together, and the room could indeed be easily rearranged for other functions. So yes, I suppose it was multi-purpose. It was around this time that I began to think about Becca. I needed to put more focus on finding her, and I was sure she was in the building somewhere and maybe looking for me. This was the one detail of our rendezvous that we hadn't discussed. Exactly where to meet after getting to the facility, but there were a series of odd occurrences from this point forward that made this absent detail less of a problem. These feelings and thoughts of Becca were not fleeting. They were vivid, prolonged, and intense. I didn't know what came over me at the time, but suddenly, I could feel Becca's presence and my heartbeat accelerated. It was one of those odd moments where I was happy to be alive regardless of the strange situation. Felt good to be thinking of her. I looked around the room and there was a faint glow coming from a side door. I should point out that I was not afraid of this glow. I was drawn to it. It felt positive and warm, like a fireplace on a cold day or cold hands on a warm mug. I followed it. I exited the multipurpose room through this back door, following the light, and learned that it led me right back to the hallway I'd first entered with the elevators via a perpendicular hall. Therefore, this office area was a loop. I stopped dead in my tracks as soon as I'd left the room, however. There was another doorway right in front of me with a glass panel along the side. I could have sworn that I saw someone standing in the unlit room. When I took a closer look inside, I did not see anything but several stacked chairs. The stacks were the size of a person, so I was prepared to dismiss the thought when I suddenly heard a door close again down the hall. "Becca?" I called out but received no answer. The glow was gone. The entire back hallway was lined with rolling chairs which I scooted and stumbled by. They must have been removed from the room I'd left for an impromptu meeting with no regard for the fire marshal's guidelines, but were never returned. I saw the glow return down at the end of the hall and saw Becca this time in a ghostly way and surrounded by light. She looked at me but turned the corner toward the stairway without making a sound. I ventured toward the stairway and saw the door close. I followed again and decided not to go to any of the upper floors because the ghostly image of Becca went down. I went back down too, but this time to the lowest level. I could now hear her footsteps and the way she walked, which I could not before, and in my experience, she typically jingled a little because of bracelets or her keys perhaps, but I pursued her at some distance. When I arrived at the lower floor, I saw spray paint on the door in purple lettering. Stars and Hawk Beak. XOXO. I learned that this doorway led to the industrial side of the facility. Upon entering this side of the building, I was hearing a lot of noises but did not see Becca, and it was very dark. The flare was helping me out again though. I tried to keep the door I'd entered through cracked for its minimal but additional lighting from the stairway and as a point of reference, but it insisted on closing behind me and I had no ready objects to prop it open adequately. The space before me was narrow and straight. I moved forward slowly and saw that there were a series of 6-foot-tall lockers lining the walls. The low level of light was devoured and killed by this abyss running on into the distance before me. I swallowed and slowed my pace but froze as soon as I'd heard a banging sound up ahead. The sound occurred only twice, and after waiting I did not hear anything again. The most unfortunate part of this setup was that the lockers lined both sides of the hall, and they were all open and facing away from me. Every one of them was open. Anyone or anything could have been hiding behind the locker doors. Anything could be waiting for me there. I thought of Francis's followers awaiting my arrival. I pushed on down the locker-lined hallway. The flicker of the flare gave the illusion of movement in the hall up ahead. A glance over my shoulder only made matters worse because I could not see back to the door I'd entered. I had to keep moving. Then, I heard footsteps, but the acoustics of the area made it difficult to tell where they were coming from. Becca appeared in front of me again with a faint glow, but this time she spoke.
Adrian, it's okay. Those noises are just temperature changes. And the rain. Nothing to be concerned about.
She waved her hands at our surroundings.
This facility is under my protection now. It may not look like it, and it is a work in progress, but don't be afraid.
Becca turned and gave a pushing motion to the path in front of me. Following this, all the lockers closed, which added definition to the hall. Then she raised one finger and made the hall glow.
This way. I'll show you,
she urged. She led me down the now illuminated hall, and she gradually became realer to me and less of a dream. I could now feel the grated floor giving to her as she walked, smell her scent in the air before me, and see that the halo from her was less glaring and otherworldly. She grabbed my hand and led me up a small set of steps to a door. She placed my hand on the door.
Open it.
I did. Then she pointed.
Down those steps. Second door on the right.
Her spirit said to me before vanishing. I descended the steps, moved forward, and slowly approached the door. I opened it. It looked like some kind of control room, and I saw Becca sitting on the floor with her eyes closed and her legs crossed. Morning, day, and night rested on the floor next to her. She was surrounded by candles and incense burning. She had a few braids in her hair. She was so beautiful just sitting there like that. I didn't want to disturb her. She was also wearing makeup, I noticed, wore black lipstick, and had drawn a small black crescent moon on her forehead. Before I was able to compliment her, she was already speaking. She hadn't even opened her eyes yet.
This is the centermost point in the entire building and the lowest walkable point too. Isn't that interesting?
Becca asked of me before opening her eyes. She'd been meditating.
It's the place to cast a circle if there ever was one. It's also the place to be during a major storm or if a bomb ever went off outside. Look at these supports.
She pointed to the framework of the room.
You'd have wanted to be here when Francis launched the missiles, if the blast made it this far out. There are a lot of dangerous things in this place that might make you think otherwise, but this is the place to be.
Based on an earlier conversation with her at the lighthouse, I'd assumed that my encounter with the glowing spirit version of her was a form of astral projection or spirit throwing, as she liked to say. She immediately confirmed my thoughts by saying,
I threw my spirit to you because the vibrations are usually positive feeling and warm when I do that. In a place like this, we could use all the help we can get. I didn't want to alarm you by walking up to you in person in the dark. That usually makes people uncomfortable no matter who they are, and it's just not very nice. That'd be pretty fucked up, wouldn't it? If I came up to you in person, in a place like this, there's no way to do it without sounding like a threat. But like I said, this whole facility is protected now. It's not perfect, but it should help.
She stood up, taking my hand. You look amazing. I finally managed to squeeze in.
Thanks. I like your look too. It makes you look official.
Becca grinned.
Are you here to arrest me now for trespassing and vandalism?
She was referring to the security guard's jacket I was wearing. She straightened it on me.
I did it all, you know? I completely trashed this place. Do you have a gun? Electroshock weapons? Handcuffs?
Becca said, already starting to laugh. I might. And what if I do? She shrugged and shook her head as she advanced.
None of that matters to me, babe. Have all the toys you like. Between you and me, I'd still kick your ass, you know that. And I think we both kinda like that.
She joked before pinching my arm in a flirty way and biting her lip. For that, now I gotta take you in. I played along. I grabbed hold of her hand, then wrapped her in my arms like I was ready to drag her away. She shrieked and giggled before I turned her around, and then she kissed me.
But really, how did it go? I want to hear.
She stepped back. As usual, she snapped out of play and went back to business. As you know, it did work out. I brought her up to date on my activities.
Now to the next task. We need to talk about the next phase of our plan before Francis finds us. We should head upstairs. You can even show me the little library you found.
This story is 100% original and written by a human, yours truly, the author. AI was not used to write, prompt, organize, or otherwise generate this story. This audiobook edition was, however, created using licensed text-to-voice software with a lifelike casting and intonation manually adjusted and refined line by line by me, and art in and of itself. The theme music was written and produced by Kiss the Widow. If you like what you found so far, please like and follow, subscribe, and share. Also, please be sure to check out my socials.